This morning, fairly massive protests continued in Iran, and we're joined now by an Iranian-American journalist and media analyst to make sense of all of this. Negar Mortazavi, welcome to the Damage Report.
Thanks for having me.
Very glad to have you here. So give us a little bit of context to these recent protests. What is stimulating this new action?
So the very last round of protests in the past few days, as you've probably heard the news, is because an Iranian missile, as the Iranian officials say, accidentally or due to human error, shot down a civilian airplane, a Ukrainian flight that killed 176 civilians, most of them Iranian, some children on board, students, graduate students who were moving to Canada or studying in Canada. Most people were basically spending their New Year holiday in Iran for weddings, for family gatherings, and they were returning back to Canada via Kyiv, Ukraine, and this plane was shut down. The government denied that it was hit by a missile for 3 days. There were so many rumors and conspiracies in Iranian media. And then finally, after 3 days, officials acknowledged that it was hit by a missile, shot down by a missile, and apologized and promised to do an investigation. So the actual catastrophe of hitting a civilian plane, basically letting a civilian flight be in the air at the night of an operation, the retaliation operation, Iran against the US. And then also the lying and the denials for 3 days after that has caused this very raw anger. Many students of Iranian universities that have lost their friends on the flight basically took charge, took the lead of these protests, and we've seen them happening in multiple cities in Iran for third day in a row.
Let me ask you a question about the time that it took for them to acknowledge what had actually happened. So apparently the Ukrainian government had photos showing fairly clear shrapnel damage that would be hard to deny as being some sort of mechanical flaw. In your view, the time that they took, are they being responsible in checking all options, or was it fairly clear very early on from what they knew what had actually happened, and it simply became an untenable position to not admit what the truth was?
I'm not 100% sure because of the lack of transparency from the government side, which is also this other problem. What seems clear is that there was disagreement within the highest political echelons in Iran. Some wanted to continue with the denials, with the lie, basically, and some were adamant in getting it out. And apparently that's one reason that contributed to this. And to be frank, 3 days is not a very long time to just, keep quiet or wait for the result of an investigation. If they had said nothing, if they hadn't denied it, or if they didn't come out with very strong statements that were basically lies, I don't think this much anger would be targeted at the government. If they just said, hey, listen, we're waiting for an investigation, for example, we're gonna let you know in 2-3 days. But the problem is that they kept lying. They pressured the media. State media was putting out these denials. And some government officials are now coming out and saying, we didn't even know. This is the information that was given to us. Not 100% of the government force knows what exactly happened. But there were definitely people who were in the know, and they didn't share it with whoever was denying it. So that's definitely a problem. As far as the Ukrainians, again, I'm not 100% sure. The whole situation is not very transparent. I know Iranians were inviting the Ukrainians for the investigation. It was announced early on because it was a Ukrainian flight, and it was known that this eventually will get out because this is an international flight, because other countries are involved. Many of these people were Canadian citizens or residents, so the Canadian government was also very much involved in this. So sooner or later, basically it would have come out. But the fact that they denied it and they put out lies for 3 days is also something that's making people very angry, and is this loss of trust basically in the government.
And I know that not everyone is the same, but to the extent that we can know, do the protesters seem to accept that it was actually an accident, human error, however it's going to be framed? What do they actually want to happen in the future?
Well, the protesters are asking for resignations, which I think is a natural response. I'm not sure if we're going to see resignations, at least in officials that are high up, but hopefully we will, because this is a catastrophe that shouldn't have happened. The other perspective is that, yes, this might have been a human error. And what's very interesting is a similar incident actually that happened in 1988 when a US Navy warship shot down, again, an Iranian civilian flight. 290 people on board died, 66 children included, over the Persian Gulf, basically, again, due to human errors, the Americans later said, taking it for a fighter jet, basically approaching the warship. So would this type of human error happen in an atmosphere of war? Yes, possible. It's happened in the past. But why did the Iranians, who made the decision of keeping an airport in a capital of a country that has just launched this operation, why keep that open? Why did a dozen civilian flights, commercial planes, basically flying over Tehran? As the military has explained, they were in highest alert. They say they were seeing hostile behavior in the airspace around them. The radars were picking up things that they imagined would be cruise missiles approaching them. So when you're in that state, the natural response that people are expecting is to close down commercial flights, which they failed to do. That's not a human error. That's just the mismanagement and a bad decision that then leaves the door open to such incidents that could be human error, could not. The lack of transparency is also something that makes people wonder about these conspiracies.
I also, while we have you on, I wanted to know, whenever I see news, like Western news of things like protests in Iran right now, when it's filtered through the American media lens, I never know how much I can trust the way they're portraying the size or scale or intent of the protests, especially with the tense situation between the US and Iran right now, the predisposition of the US media towards being supportive of foreign conflicts. What are some things that people in America or in the West right now should know about these sorts of movements in Iran? What are some misconceptions that they might have come to accept?
Well, this is a great point. I also don't want to lump all American media together. I have friends who work for example, the New York Times or the Washington Post, and they're doing excellent reporting on what's happening in Iran. Some of them even far away from the US here. They don't have access on the ground, but they're doing excellent reporting. But for example, you go on Fox News, you turn on Fox News and you see a completely separate image. Or even the US government, you see State Department officials now chiming in, for example, on Twitter, and some people taking that as news or analysis of what's happening on the ground. And just to give you a clear example, last week after the assassination of Qassem Soleimani, when Iranians took to the street in millions to basically commemorate a general or oppose this US act, that didn't seem like Iranian population. And the State Department, the White House basically tried everything they can to deny the fact that these were Iranians, try to portray it as something that's orchestrated or engineered by the government or by the regime, which is not true. And then this week, when you see these protesters, all of a sudden President Trump jumps on this political football, calls them these brave Iranian protesters. They're very brave and it's good to support them, but just the message that's coming sounds so much political, as if it's only they're only cheered on basically when they're in line with what President Trump's policy in Iran is, the hawkish policy in Iran. So if there's anti-regime chants on the street, he's going to cheer them. But if there's millions of Iranians who oppose his policy, his hawkish maximum pressure, then it's going to be either ignored or tried in any way to deny. And that's, I think, very problematic here from the administration, which also trickles down to some media, of course, not all.
Yeah, and a lot of the media will not have a particular amount of expertise in the region, and it's very easy to think. It's very easy to think that a population thinks one thing, but like any country, there are very large groups of people that disagree on very fundamental things, and so that's
exactly. We had just to make this quick point. I live here in downtown Washington. There was the crowd for the inauguration of President Trump here in downtown Washington. The next day, more population came out for the Women's March in the same exact street. All of them are Americans. They have very different polarizing views, but to just deny one side of the population or the other one is, not very factual.
Yeah. Well, for that reason, we appreciate you joining us and helping break down the situation. Nagar Mortazavi, Iranian American journalist and media analyst, thank you once again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching this clip from the Damage Report. For more content from the show and access to TYT Network members-only exclusives, go to tyt.com/Brooke. Wait, no, it's tyt.com/John. Go to tyt.com/John to sign up.